11. The Battle of Bosque River. Early the next morning, the captain took 6 men that could ride good, including Big and Little Josh and Alvadine, and rode downstream toward Waco Village, bypassing the cotton farm, and they could still smell the smoke of the burning town some miles off in the distance. Isadawa and Tawakoni with 60 warriors went with them, and they were prepared to take the fight to the Mexican cavalry. The other warriors came along and took up position at the cotton farm, some of them on the roof of the house and some of them on the barn. Johnston and his men rode on for an hour or more and approached the ruins with caution, seeing that not the entire town had been burned. The structures in the center of town were intact, and high over the church steeple the Mexican flag was waving in the breeze. Alvadine scowled and said, "That there just isn't right, Captain." Buckskin Jake glared angrily at the flag and said, "No, it ain't right, not when it represents a damn dictator. It's a coming down, it is." Captain Johnston said, "Buckskin, you, me, and Ken will go scout the town. Big Josh, you stay here with the rest of the men until we return. We have to draw them out of the town like we planned and get them after us." "Sure thing, Captain," replied Big Josh. When they had left, Big Josh and the men dismounted and tethered the horses and took up a good strong firing position on either side of the trail to wait. The captain and the others went on a long way, and finding a thick forest of river-bottom trees and scrub, they tethered and hid the horses, and with their weapons and plenty of ammunition in their possibles bag, they slowly made their way toward the edge of the town. They paused, and while Tanner and Johnston took cover, Buckskin handed his musket to Kenneth and then climbed up on the large cottonwood tree in front of them so that he could manage to climb, and one tall enough for him to see inside the town. Once up high, he took a small telescope from his possibles bag, and putting it to his right eye, he zoomed in on the guard post at the edge of town first, and then into the center of town to the Mexican flag flying over the steeple of the church, and then over to the town hall where standards had been set up outside the front door. From these banners, he was able to identify what unit they were up against. Coming back down, Tanner handed Buckskin his rifle, and the frontiersman said, "Up ahead is an outpost, 4 guards that I could see, and the banners in front of the town hall tell me that this is the Tabasco Permanent Cavalry Squadron, or in Spanish, the Escuadrón de Guerra de Puebla. They're well known, Captain, well known, and last I heard they were commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Miguel Soria, and they say that he's a very tough hombre." The 3 of them moved on, and it was not long before they heard voices speaking in Spanish, and the captain motioned for Ken and Jake to get down, and when they had, he crawled through the brush ever so slowly, and before long he could see a guard post and 4 Mexican soldados in bright red and blue uniforms and tall military hats. They were sitting on a bench that had been brought out and set up, while another one was standing up and smoking a cigar. Johnston crawled back to the others and signaled the number 4 with his left hand and motioned for the others to crawl forward. When all 3 were together, they picked a target and fired. The blue smoke of the black powder filled the air, and the soldado smoking the cigar was thrown backwards into the dirt with a .50 caliber musket ball in the heart. 2 others were shot in the forehead, and the last one threw himself over the back of the bench for cover, and in panic he fired a shot. That was when Buckskin Jake pulled out his flintlock and charged at the bench, yelling a Choctaw war cry, and shot the soldado in the face. He ran back to the others and began reloading his weapons, as were the captain and Kenneth. The Battle of Bosque River had begun. They could hear the sound of many voices in Spanish, and a dozen soldados appeared, running past the charred ruins of barns and cabins up the street toward the guard post. When the soldados saw their comrades lying dead, they cried, "Malditos idiotas tejanos!" The Texicans fired their muskets, hitting 3 more and sending them down, and the Mexicans returned fire as the 3 Texicans ran as hard as they could for their horses. A moment or so later, a platoon of cavalrymen came galloping up on fine black stallions, and seeing that his men on foot had taken cover, the Mexican officer shouted, "Por donde fueron los bastardos?" Which way did the bastards go? The corporal of the guard replied, "Haba 3 idiotas estúpidos y corrieron hacia este por el camino, Captain Elizondo, y tres viejos locos, señor. There were 3 stupid idiots, and they ran east down the road, Captain Elizondo. They were 3 crazy old men, sir. Elizondo replied, Mas como 3 toros viejos que un anciano caba Héctor Montoya si fueron capaces de matar a 3 guardias y herir a 3 sus hombres. More like 3 old bulls and old men, Corporal Hector Montoya, if they were able to kill the 3 guards and wound 3 of your men. Elizondo waved his arm and cried to his equestrians, Adelante! The 3 Texicans reloaded on the run, and when they had untethered their horses, they leaped onto the backs and were away just as Elizondo and the soldados saw them. Elizondo cried, Soldados, preparen sus lanzas! Soldiers, make ready your lances. The soldiers did as they were commanded, and Elizondo cried, Muerte a los rebeldes! Ataque! Death to the rebels! Attack! Johnston, Tanner, and Buckskin rode past the ambush site, and when Elizondo and his men were inside the attack zone, Big Josh said, or cried, Give some hell, boys! Alvadine was the first to open fire, remembering what his father had always taught him about shooting, saying over and over, Aim small, miss small. Aim small, miss small. His shot hit Elizondo's left shoulder, knocking him off his horse. 8 more soldados were shot, and the others immediately charged their attackers, crying, Viva Mexico! Viva Mexico! The Texicans fired their flintlocks and hit 3. However, the other came into Big Josh's battle position with their lances, and the fighting was hand to hand. Alvadine was beside himself, crying, Oh, hell, what now? He saw Farmer Roberts cut to ribbons by a soldado's lance, and saw 2 others go down with the lanceros, stabbing them from a distance as they tried to reload. Just barely enough time, Alvadine reloaded and shot the soldado in the throat, and when the soldado had fallen, Alvadine grabbed the man's lance and stabbed another soldado in the kidney who was trying to impale Little Josh. 'Twas then that they heard the sound of a bugle, and the remaining lanceros withdrew, taking Elizondo and their other wounded troopers with them, and Johnston cried, Big Josh, you and the boys get the dead and wounded onto the horses and fall back to the Cotton homestead. The cavalry platoon withdrew back to Waco village with the wounded Elizondo and their dead, and when they had been secured in the town, the entire troop was assembled, and Lieutenant Colonel Miguel Soria was ready for battle. Soria was a man of average height with dark skin and brown eyes and a row of very large front upper teeth, and had served with distinction ever since the war for independence against Spain, and before, when he had fought beside Padre Hidalgo. And although Santana was not a man that Soria liked, he did his duty as an officer in his nation's army. The wounded were secured in the church, and as Elizondo was being treated for his shoulder wound, Soria asked him, Viejo amigo, ¿por dónde fueron los? Old friend, which way did they go? Elizondo was in terrible pain, and he could barely reply through his gasps as the surgeon treated his wound. Habaviente rebeldes, y retiraron hacia el este por el río. There were 20 rebels, and they retreated east up the river, Soria replied. Muy bien, viejo amigo. Debe haber ganado el río, y ahora voy a castigarlos a todos hasta la muerte. Very good, old friend. There must be farms up the river, and now I go to chastise them all, even unto death. Soria left Hector and his men behind to guard the church and keep the tiny town secure, and at the flourishes of his buglers and with flags and banners dancing in the breeze, the Tabasco Permanent Cavalry Squadron, Escuadrón Liguero de Puebla, marched westward out of the ruined town as Soria, with his saber high in the air, cried, Caballero, adelante! This squadron consisted of 4 troops of 80 men each. Thus, Soria had 320 lanceros, many more than the Texicans had estimated, for they hadn't seen every unit. In the meanwhile, Johnston and his men returned to the cotton farm, and from this high ground they could see the dust of the Mexican cavalry advancing upriver. Isadawa said, We all ready here now for a good fight. Tawankani took some braves around the north side like we planned, and when those scalp hunters get here, he will be ready. We know this land better than anyone. Johnston replied, And that is a good idea, I think, Isa, because the enemy is going to be here very soon.